No, I'm good. Once the room quiets down, it's easier too. Yeah, that's right.
I just want to lift it up.
I will ask whether they mind if people sit there, but it's close to the wire, but they not take it down.
Something I just want to listen to?
No, sorry, I didn't know there's any, so I just have fun and no, I don't learn about it.
Okay, we need someone to stand in the door and take over, not let everybody in. Well, there's two questions.
Go ahead.
You come with me. Make sure that it's locked.
How close are we? You're ready? You're good? Okay.
I was just chatting to her beside me, and she was already going to ask me questions about the anyway, so I won't.
Yeah.
Judith has Catherine's mic.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to have your attention. We're going to start. This is a fantastic turnout tonight. As you can tell, we had seats for 180 people, and we have a lot more standing. My name is Judith Shane, and I'm with the Hampton Iona Community Group. Our association, along with the Keller Park Community Association, Wellington Villages Community Association, and Westboro, have all co-sponsored this debate tonight. We're very pleased that you're all here. Just a couple quick things. You may see all the cameras. This debate's being filmed in its entirety tonight. It will be shown on Rogers Cable Television 3 times throughout the next 3 weeks. And I can't remember the first day, I think they just added one, but it's October 15th and October 21st. You'll be able to watch the debate. So for that reason, please put your cell phones on mute or turn off your cell phones so we don't have any interruptions. We'd like to thank, first of all, Bridgehead at Golden and Richmond for supplying us with all the coffee tonight. If you need to stay awake, we have caffeinated coffee. And if you're really charged up by this debate, there's decaffeinated coffee too. And we'd also like to thank Amica. They supplied us tonight with 3 trays of absolutely delicious cookies. And I know that because I've already hit 4 tonight. So I'm really charged up, and I can stay awake. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge, and you can see hopefully how much work has gone into putting on this debate. We started in mid-July, and we've had great cooperation for all the campaigns. We had to start by picking dates. So we've been working on this for quite some time, and we've had a fantastic crew of volunteers from all the 4 associations helping us, as well as George from St. George's Parish. And we do hope you all enjoyed the debate. And I'd just like to say, like to ask you to applaud for all of our volunteers. There's way too many to mention. On to the business of the evening. I'm going to introduce Warren Cutler from the Hampton Area Community Group. He's going to review the agenda and the format for tonight and introduce our moderator. I just want to say one thing. Amanda Pfeffer from CBC, many of you may recognize her voice as soon as you hear her or recognize her from TV. She has been fantastic to work with. We wanted to make sure this debate was very fair and that we took everyone's interests, including the public and the candidates, in mind. And Amanda has worked with us constantly in the last week to review and revise everything. And she, I just want to say, because probably won't be said about her, but she went back to school a few years ago, got a master's in journalism, and her thesis is in election coverage. Okay, so we'll start the business of the evening. I hope you enjoy yourself, and it's just great to see such a big turnout for such a good democratic cause. Lauren?
Thank you, Judith, and thank you for all your hard work on putting this together. As Judith said, I'm the president of the Hampton Iona Community Group. We're one of the 4 associations that have helped to put this together. So just one minor housekeeping point. You'll see a lot of cables in the room. In most places, they're taped down, but not everywhere. So there's some cables mainly at the front, but under some of the chairs. So be very careful if you're sitting over a cable. That's for the housekeeping. So as Judith said, I will be outlining this evening's format, and Amanda will be giving the details on how it will work. So following my remarks, the moderator, as I said, will be discussing how the evening will work. Then the candidates will all give their opening statements. Following the opening statements, each of the 4 community associations sponsoring this evening will be asking one official question from their association. After that, the floor will be open to the public. So all of you can line up, and there's, I guess we only have 1 mic for questions. Yeah. Yep. So there's 1 mic in the center aisle. So if you have a question, if you could line up. If for accessibility reasons you have trouble lining up, please let us know. So we'll let the moderator know that there could be a question coming up from somewhere else in the audience. Following the questions, the candidates will be given time to make their closing statements, and then we will be just making our brief closing remarks. We've done several of these over the years, and we've never had a turnout like this. So for those who say...
in case you get freaked out, I just have to look out the window. People who have the windows open, somebody wave to me.
I suspect that is a first. So whoever says people are not engaged with the political process, haven't wrong, at least in the Kitchissippi ward. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator this evening, Amanda Pfeffer. She's been a journalist at the CBC for some 20 years. She's been in Ottawa since 2011. You've heard her on CBC Radio, and you've seen her on CBC TV, both as a reporter and sometimes as a host for such shows as Ottawa Morning in Ontario Today. As an Anglophone growing up in Montreal, she always had a special love for politics, both big and small. and has covered an endless parade of federal, provincial, and municipal elections from coast to coast. Now Amanda is eager to have an opportunity to vote in Ottawa's municipal election in the riding where she lives, which is Kitchissippi. So, welcome Amanda, thank you.
And good evening to all of you. I'm just amazed by the number of people who have come out tonight to participate in this debate. And in this particular ward, we have 5 candidates, all of which have contributed to this community in some way or another. It's a real testament to what's happening in this ward, how proud I am to live in this ward, only a few months now. And also to see all of you want to come here, listen to the ideas that are here, and to give a space where people will feel free to talk about their ideas in a safe space where this debate, we hope, will be civil and people will enjoy and go away with some of the ideas that they hear tonight and have a better sense of the choices that they have on election day. I want to talk a little bit about the rules for this debate. As mentioned, candidates have strict time constraints. They have 2 minutes for their opening remarks, 90 seconds for all the answers to questions, both in the beginning, the questions from the association, and during the audience questions. And then they have a minute each for their closing remarks. Now, the timekeeper will count down the time, and candidates will be warned at 30 seconds when that time runs out. And if they're not finished, the sound technician, in fact, will turn off their microphone. So, not so for the audience. So we are asking that when we get to that portion of the program, that you keep your questions brief and succinct, and I'll remind you if you forget. And just a note, let me just make sure I haven't missed anything here. Yes, a note about the audience participation. We are asking that there be no applause during the opening remarks. Applause just takes a lot of space. You can imagine there's 5 candidates, applause takes 30 seconds, it's 2.5 minutes gone with each question that we ask. So after 4 questions, that's 10 minutes. After 2 hours, you can just imagine all that space that you could have had to ask questions and hear answers. So we'll ask you to refrain from that. And of course, heckling is discouraged, and I'll remind you that it's discouraged. Again, we're trying to create a respectful space here for a debate where all the candidates and the audience members will be able to participate in this and enjoy this debate. It's been really a rock and roll campaign here in the Kitchissippi ward. And you can tell from all of the people that have come out to watch it. So let's have an enjoyable debate and enjoy some of the ideas that we're going to hear tonight. So why don't we start? So we're going to start with, okay. All right, so you have numbers. So who is, just to know who is first, by the way, for answers. So it's going to be Larry is first, and second is Mr. Lieber. Okay. So we're going to start taking questions. This is the first portion of the debate, and we're going to be taking questions from the 4 associations that are participating. Oh, the opening remarks. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm rushing right ahead. That's right. Okay, so we're going to start with Larry Wasplan. Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone here. My name is Larry Wasplan. Was a registered nurse for 40 years, worked at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, the Ottawa Hospital, and was an active member, I am an active member in the Labour movement, the peace and anti-austerity movements here in the city. I would just like to say that this election is taking place on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin land. Council needs new priorities, a people-centered vision. No more sweet backroom deals for speculators or developers, as they're known in City Hall. No more handy exemptions, no more special favors. Meaningful consultation with the community to find real solutions to poverty, affordable housing, childcare, and traffic congestion. We need more democracy and more transparency. community input that carries weight and is not just a symbolic gesture and exercise. A people-centered vision would be concentrated on an effort to end poverty in the city. Such things as a fair wage policy, which would prevent contractors from filling their pockets at workers' and taxpayers' expense. A living wage policy for all workers in Ottawa. Safe, affordable, integrated public housing. Drastically reduce transit fees for people on social assistance, unemployed, seniors, and students. A people-centered city council would fight for a new financial deal from Queen's Park to adequately fund our social services. We give homeowners and tenants a much-needed tax break. And one of the things I'd like to see our city council do is pass a resolution to save door-to-door mail delivery here in Kitchissippi. The other thing I would like to see, very important, is an effort to deal with the childcare deficit, space deficit, that is so important here. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Larry. And Jeff Lieber.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Amanda. My name is Jeff Lieber, and I'm running to be City Councilor in Kitchissippi Ward. I've spent the last 17 years passionate about making a contribution to this community. I've done a lot of fun stuff. I've organized the Hinchenberg 5K run, dog movie night, an annual street hockey tournament. I shoot free photos with Santa at my community's Kringle event. But I've also put in, I don't know how many thousands of hours on things like community design plans, neighborhood plans, the plans that are intended to guide how Kitchissippi is going to grow. And based on that experience, the experience of 17 years sitting around those tables, I can tell you this evening that we are at a crossroads. I think there are two roads that we can go down. The first road is one that I hear you tell me about at the door. It's the road I want to go down. It's the road you want to go down, which is that we together guide how Kitchissippi is going to grow. We have meaningful input into things like the budget. We have ward-wide discussions about how the resources that are available to our community are going to be spent. We have plans that we develop together for development and intensification that we stick to. The second road that we could go down is one in which the development of the community is imposed from outside, in which we don't have the meaningful input into things like the budget, in which we don't have the meaningful input into how we're going to allocate resources. My commitment, based on the experience that I have personally and professionally and in my volunteer work, is to ensure that we go down that first path, the one in which we develop a Kitchissippi that is livable and prosperous and green and creative, and we develop it together. That's my track record, and that's my promise. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that Michelle Reimer is here. Oh, Ellen Longhee.
Okay, I'm middle of the pack. My name is Ellen Longhee. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. I moved to Ottawa about 24 years ago, and I used to live in Montreal, which I loved, but I followed the same path as Amanda. I moved here. I wasn't sufficiently bilingual to stay in Montreal, plus I wanted to move to a smaller community. So I've lived in Kitchissippi for 10 years, and I've experienced a lot of the issues myself that people are going to be addressing tonight. So I want people to know that my door will always be open. You can phone me, you can email me. If you can keep up with me while I'm in my wheelchair, you can run along and tell me what your problems are. Anyway, you want to get in touch with me, I'm open to it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my platform. I want to make seniors' issues a priority. That means when discussing policies, bylaws, construction, development, safety, all those things. I want to make our streets safe for pedestrians and bicyclists. I want to address common traffic. I want to encourage retailers to become more wheelchair accessible, baby carriage accessible, etc. I see I'm running out of time already. So I'll discuss more of those issues while I'm later on in our get together here. So I want to talk about commitment, judgment, dedication, and the fact that I develop personal rapport with almost everyone I meet. You speak, I listen, and together we accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Now it's Michelle Ryder.
Thank you, Amanda. And welcome, everybody. Thank you to the community associations for co-hosting. I'm very pleased to be here tonight and see the overflowing rooms. It reminds me of the overflowing streets that we're having as well in Kitchissippi Ward. So I'm here tonight to talk about Citizens First, and that is my campaign slogan that I've come up with early in April when I was nominated. I'm hearing across the table tonight that it's not an uncommon theory of change, that generally speaking, we are feeling heard in Kitchissippi. Therefore, we're not feeling that our voices are making an impact on policies that the city is responsible for developing. We need to put citizens back in the heart of decision-making at the City of Ottawa. I've been a resident here for 7 years. I'm married with 2 children, 5 and 16 years old. We live in the Civic Hospital area, and we love our life here. We came here because of the beautiful community and the growth that was happening in the ward. No doubt about it, it's an attractive place to be, and a lot of people want to come here. Residents, businesses, etc., and developers. However, with this growth, there comes challenge, and I'm here to address that challenge tonight with you and your questions. But more importantly, I believe that this is a time that it's imperative to have strong leadership that understands change. And that is the domain in which I work today. Today, I'm a consultant that's hired by organizations to deal with change. I help communities and organizations determine a common vision. I look at priorities for communities, and I make a living at collaborating with people just like you. So my hope is to bring that experience to City Hall, and you can learn more about that tonight as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And finally, last but not least, we've got Catherine Hobbs.
Thanks very much, Amanda. And I also want to say thank you to Judith and the other community associations that worked so hard to put this together and obviously very successfully communicated it to the community. So thank you for that. And thank you all for coming, and even the group behind listening through the window. I am Catherine Hobbs. I'm the current councillor in Kitchissippi Ward, and it has really been my honor to serve you for the past 4 years. And I'm proud of my record, and I'm running on my record, and I'm proud of the accomplishments that we've worked on together over the last 4 years. And those are things like the revamp of Fisher Park and getting your input on that and getting the park that you wanted. That's the traffic improvements that we've done throughout the ward, and the largest dog run in Ottawa up at Hampton. And I'm proud of the plans as well I have for the next 4 years. And the big one in this area is to have this become the citywide zone for 40 kilometers. Have it be the test case for the entire city and the infrastructure that will come along with to make sure that happens. So tonight I'm asking for your support to re-elect me for the next 4 years. And I'm asking for that if you want a councillor who unites rather than divides residents. I'm asking for that if you want someone that loves all the neighborhoods and not someone who's quoted in the Ottawa Citizen saying no one wants to wake up in Westboro. I'm asking you to elect me as councillor if you want someone who supports our small businesses and doesn't say it looks like Rockcliffe threw up in one of our small restaurants in Hintonburg. Someone who has a positive view of Kitchissippi and not a negative one, and one who has broad support across the ward, and someone who's experienced and ready to go on day one. So in closing, I'm asking for your support on October 27th, and I'm looking forward to your questions tonight to give you more information about my plans for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So that's Catherine Hobbs and the end of the introductory remarks. And we're going to move now to the 4 associations which help put this together. And each of them have a question. And each of the candidates will have 90 seconds to answer each of these questions. We're going to start with the Westboro Community Association.
Good evening. My name is Terrence Nelligan. I'm with the Westboro Community Association. The question is, if elected, What is your number one goal for improvement in Kitchissippi Ward, and how will you measure progress on achieving that goal? Thank you.
Okay, all right, so we'll start with Jeff then.
That is a very good question. The number one goal over the course of the next 4 years, what I'd like to be able to say at the end of that term that I've been successful at doing, is ensuring that the community's voice has been heard across the spectrum of issues that we face. Whether it is traffic calming, how we allocate the resources that are available to us for our parks, whether it's how the city defends its zoning when it comes to development applications. I'd like to be able to say that the city, the councillor, the city government have heard what you, the residents, want, and that they've defended that. There are different ways we can measure that. How often has the city defended its own zoning rather than approve applications simply because we don't want to fight them at the Ontario Municipal Board? How many times have the parts that have gone in without controversy? How many times have the has the budget gone according to meaningful choices? How many hours have we spent discussing the meaningful choices that we need to talk about in the course of creating the budget? I think there are ways in which we can measure whether or not the residents' voices have been heard. When I take a look at those yardsticks for the past 4 years, I don't see them. At the end of 4 years, I'd like to ensure that we make better success at meeting those.
Thank you for that, Jeff, and we'll go to Larry.
Well, thank you very much. That is a very good question. And I think in terms of extending the democratic process, as we can see here tonight, it is very important in Kitchissippi, and having a really meaningful consultation with the community on some of the most important decisions that are going to be coming out of City Council. In particular, I'm very concerned with things like poverty and affordable housing. So this is where direct community input is accessible, and we can measure that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Larry. And Catherine Ross. Thanks. The number one goal in Kitchissippi in the next 4 years is to make sure that the light rail system comes into Kitchissippi to Tunney's pasture, and the second phase of it gets underway in a way that we will be able to accommodate the needs and requirements of the people in Kitchissippi who will be affected by the route of the light rail. But this is a project that is the biggest one in the city's history since we built the canal. It's a very expensive project, and it is a very impactful project on different parts of our area. It's important to me that we have a Cleary station so that we will be able to get more people on the train, and that we do an associated community design plan in that area to make sure we have everyone's input as to what will happen in that area as a result of having the transit station there. And so there are a number of different aspects to light rail that are very impactful, even what might happen with cut-through traffic during the detour period and the redesign of Scott Street following the light rail, all related and all a critical issue to Kitchissippi Ward. And by 2023, we will have 7 stations here in Kitchissippi, and we want to make sure we're ready for that, and we have been able to deal with the implementation of light rail. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine, and Michelle Reiner.
Thank you. Well, there's a laundry list in my mind of thinking about every conversation I've had at the door of what's important. And certainly what floats to the top is development and traffic. So if you want to talk about clear, measurable goals in which we want to address that, the number one would be that development has to start following the rules, and that a clear, measurable goal would be that we stop receiving applications that surpass the actual community design plan and official plan. So that would be an amazing goal in 4 years, to have that stop now. Second, streets. I hear about this from families with kids. I hear it from seniors who are walking a bit slower now. It's imperative that we relook at our road systems today. They're not livable. Generally, they're not safe. And overall, if I think about Parkdale and Island Park, they're not really that usable. I avoid them quite a bit. I dread when I get on those roads. So in terms of an action plan and measurable results, I will be committing in 2015 to work with every one of you who are interested in talking about your street and the issues on your street. And we're going to hold a street lab. And this is an innovation technique to define the problem based on your views and not the city's views. We're talking to you. And we're going to make an action plan of all the fixes required, not superficial fixes, but a full-on fix throughout the ward. And then we're going to finance that. We're going to look at formulas in which we can finance that. That'll be an action plan and a deliverable.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And Ellen Longhee.
I guess for me, my goal is more fundamental than a lot of the other candidates. I want to talk about affordable housing. With all the condos that are being put up, that means other people's houses are being taken down, and that happens to be housing that middle and low income people have been living in. And where are these people going to move to if all we do is take down their housing? And even some of the housing funded by the city of Ottawa is in no great shape. I was at Somerset Square the other day talking to residents that live outside that great big ugly gray building. Anyway, they have a lot of complaints, and you know, they have bed bugs and they have other kinds of bugs, and then when there's leaks, you know, the floors get all bumpy, or they just let the carpets dry out by air, so mold accumulates. There's a lot of people in there with breathing problems, and you know, it's hard on them when you've got mold growing in your place and the city doesn't look after it. They had a whole host of complaints, and I would just like to see these addressed. You know, oops, sorry, where did time go?
Thanks, Ellen. So that was a question from the Westboro Community Association. We're going to go to our second association, the Wellington Village Community Association, with your question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Catherine James McGinty. I'm the president of the Wellington Village Community Association. Over the past year, our community has undertaken several traffic calming initiatives. Some of these have been successful, and others, such as the street painting on Clarendon Avenue and slow zone initiative near Tunney's Pasture, have encountered many bureaucratic roadblocks. My question is, if you are elected to represent Kitchissippi, what will you do to help champion the community's initiatives to achieve traffic calming and help us overcome the bureaucratic roadblocks that we have run up against?
Okay, this time, why don't we start with Larry?
Well, again, this relates specifically to the work of the city councilor and the city staff. So your ability to communicate with your city councilor on these important concerns, and the ability of the city councilor to work with staff to make sure that these are not these roadblocks are not put in your way. So again, this is the job of the city councilor to make sure that these concerns are met and met promptly and efficiently. So that's the way I would deal with that.
Okay, Catherine?
Thanks. And thanks for that question, Catherine. I know that traffic's been a huge thing in this village in particular. And, you know, one of the things that I'm very supportive of is the $500,000 for Safer Roads Ottawa initiatives. That gives us a lot more opportunity to look at little fixes for problems in the area. And we've done quite a few of them, as Catherine mentioned, you know, painting the road on Clarendon and painting the 30 kilometers down on Ross Street. They worked marginally well. Paid for the painting on Ross Street out of my office budget, couldn't really afford to do that for everything that we need to do. But when it gets to bureaucratic roadblocks, I guess need everybody to understand that there are provincial traffic acts that are that take precedence as well. But one of the things that traffic is committed to do after doing the cut-through study recently is work on making this the 40-kilometer test zone. That will mean a lot of infrastructure in this area that will be put in a lot sooner than doing an overall traffic study. So I think that's a real positive. And that has come about because so many people in this neighborhood have worked so hard to identify issues and problems in this area. So I'm just thrilled with all the people in the neighborhood that have identified these problems and worked so hard with us at the city to work on solving them. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Catherine and Michelle.
We do not need another study or another test zone for 40 kilometers. There's a trend in North America where school zones are going down to, in North America, 25 kilometers an hour. So our school zone should be 30 kilometers an hour. And our streets in the local residential neighborhoods should be 40 kilometers an hour. There's no study needed. We've heard it from the neighborhoods and we've heard it from the families. I want to talk briefly about these studies. They're $150,000. They take 18 months to study. Then they take another 18 months to consult. And then they might implement what you like, but probably not, okay? So what I'm suggesting is the bureaucratic process does not serve us any longer. It is a car mentality. It is not a people mentality. And I stood here in this meeting, in this room, in May, and I spoke out at that time about traffic. You are not being listened to. We are being bogged down by analysis and paralysis. We can meet as streets and know where the problems lie. You're not making stuff up, are you? Are you? I don't think you are. I actually trust you, and I believe the traffic experts can come with me, and together we can sit in a room similar to this, and we can develop something far more reasonable, efficient, cost-effective together. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And Ellen.
Traffic concerns have been my problem since I moved into this ward. A couple of years after I moved in, I was hit by a car on the corner of Wellington and Holland, and it threw me on my wheelchair. Actually, the wheelchair saved my life because it's so sturdy. But lucky for me, I'm resilient. I bounced back and didn't get much money from the insurance companies because of it. But at least I did to tell about it. When I get to City Hall, this is one of the issues I want to address. I want to put in other, in the bureaucrat space, in real words, what people want in terms of street safety. Since I know what it's about, I can put it into words, and I'm very good at getting into their face. I don't yell, I don't scream, I just state my opinion and what others are saying, and I'm persistent with a smile. So anyway, there's no long explanation, but you know, I will truly represent what is needed to calm traffic in Kitchissippi, and I will get it done.
Thank you for that, Ellen. And last but not least, we've got Jeff.
Thanks. I'd like to probably talk about two different things in this answer. The first of which is one of the most successful strategies that we've seen in order to get change on traffic has been really pure and simple: advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. We've seen how on Ross Avenue in Wellington Village, newspaper articles have spurred the city to action. Bigger example, Lakeside, the shuttles that went down it. You know, we saw what newspaper articles and political pressure were able to accomplish. The advocacy angle is, it has to be relentless and it has to be constant. My promise to you is to amplify your voices at City Hall, to be on your side, and to keep advocating on behalf of the changes that we need. You know, just addressing really briefly the studies, at the end of my street on Hamilton Avenue North, we suddenly had a proposal to put mini roundabouts in. It was a result of a 15-year-old traffic study. No notice, we just started, we heard from another community association, Wellington Village, that, hey, there's this plan to bring new mini roundabouts to the end of your street. And the problem that they were trying to deal with was speed. 15 years ago, that was a problem. Today, the problem on Tyndall is not necessarily speed. You know, I think our processes are broken. Advocacy, and let's fix the processes. Thank you.
Okay, so we have our next community association is the McKellar Park Community Association, and we welcome your question next.
Hi, I'm Seema Lamba. I'm the president of the McKellar Park Community Association, and this is our question. Our association supports the need for better transportation systems for both suburban and urban residents. We need to invest in accessible, quality transportation for all residents in Ottawa. The current City of Ottawa approved Western Light Rapid Transit route travels in the park beside the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway and the Ottawa River, but it is not fully buried. Part of it will be partially buried, will be burned, and the rest will be trenched. The current LRT design will encroach on our limited green space and hinder full access from our community to the park and the Ottawa River, which many of us use and enjoy regularly. If you're elected, how will you ensure that our precious existing green space is preserved and remains fully accessible along the Western Light Rapid Transit route? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and we'll start with Catherine Holmes.
Thanks, Seema. You know, at this point in time, of course, the Western LRT route is under environmental assessment and will be going into functional design next year and will be ready by September of 2015. Part of that work involves a lot of negotiation with the NCC, who are asking for an uninterrupted green space situation on their property. So that is one of the goals. At this point in time, I can't really tell you what that design will look like because we don't actually know. But one thing I can tell you is that when this was approved as to go ahead by full council, I asked for an additional amount of money to make sure that we would protect basically the Kitchissippi residents that are lining the parkway and those who want to get access to the river. So an additional $80 million is part of the Western LRT project for our 1.2 kilometer section. By having that $80 million come to us in Kitchissippi, that means that they won't have light rail going out to Canada until 2031. And yet still, due to the need to get light rail through Kitchissippi in order to bring it to other parts of the city, and it will go to Bayshore and Baseline Station by 2023. In order to do that, we needed to put that extra money in, and we are going to make the best design possible with that 80 million and with the requirements of the NCC. Thank you.
Michelle.
Thank you. I'm listening carefully to Catherine to learn a few things as well. But what I'm hearing is that this was passed through council, and I don't recall that part actually happening through council yet. There is a proposal on the website for Richmond Underground. There is a video on there you can watch, and it's called The Elegant Design. There's no doubt about it that the city has to work a lot more closely with NCC and community partners like Green Space Alliance to ensure that these spaces are reconstructed and preserved. However, what I'm hearing at the door, and I'm going to put it out there now, is what happened to Carling. I've been working with, I've met with the Underground Carling Executive Group, and they're succumbed to the fact that this is happening, going to be our Western LRT. But I've also talked to people who live on Carling. I've talked to seniors, and I've talked to residents who use LRT or transit. And they keep saying, Michelle, how did that decision come about? And what can we do to really have that appropriate uptake of population using LRT? What I can provide you with a new set of eyes and ears is, some people will say, well, that train has already left the station. This is a typical thing I get. But what I would argue that is, with new eyes and new ears, I can question what the rationale was and the timing for that change. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Ellen.
Yes, I've thought about this, and several people on the street, which is where I do my campaigning, have talked to me about the LRT system. And it seems almost everyone is concerned about putting along the MCC land. So I don't even know why that's being considered. I myself would like to see the LRT, or the O train as they're going to call it, be put up near Carling, because it's a denser population up there. More people will be able to use it. There's shopping centers, there's hospitals, all the things that people, want to access easily. And if you look at other major cities like Toronto and Montreal and in the States, all their big transportation systems are located in high density areas. So why would we put it along the river, which would destroy the green space and be open to only a select few? I mean, you're just transporting civil servants back and forth if you leave it by the river. So I would just put it on Carling. Now, I don't know if it's a fait accompli, but if it isn't, I'd like to widen it up the discussion about it.
Thank you for that, Ellen. And Jeff?
Thanks. That's good. So I think we're all in agreement in this room that LRT, light rail, is critical to the sustainability of this city. We can't keep going out to the suburbs with wider roads and more roads. We have to get LRT done. And as everyone knows, my public commitment is to ensure that the LRT abides by the conditions that have been set down by the MCC. Fully buried, no loss of green space. We need to ensure that there's enough soil over it to ensure that the trees will eventually recover. Let's make that commitment now and get on with the job. We have to, if there is no plan B and we cannot abide by the NCC's conditions, then let's make sure that all of the options are fully explored. I don't think anyone has a feeling right now that there's really been a thorough explanation of anything except the current alignment. But I will say I'm not about to hit reset. Let's make the commitment to do it today, to abide by the NCC's conditions, to abide by the conditions that have been set down by the residents who live along there, and get LRT out as far as possible, as quickly as possible, for the sake of the sustainability of this city.
Thank you, Jeff. And last but not least, of course, Larry Wasplan.
Yes, thank you very much. I really think that looking at the option of going down Carling is really the way things should be going. And as I said, I'm not sure that there is the ability to reposition that. But the NCC idea of maintaining the green space, I fully support that. But I agree that this really should be going down some place like Carling, just because that's where that's where the hospital is. That's where a lot of businesses are. That's where a big traffic flow is, and that's where the LRT should be going.
Okay, and we want to thank McKellar Park Community Association for that question. And last but not least, from our hosts today, the Hampton Iona Community Group, our last question.
Thank you, Amanda. My question is about a particular aspect of development which many of us are facing, but which seldom gets discussed. And I'm using these as examples only. Since Ashcroft first got their approval to build at the convent site, they have not held any public meetings with the affected residents on such critical areas as construction schedules, blasting schedules, use of the linear park, on-street parking requirements for their workers, nighttime work requirements, etc. With the exception of one meeting with some neighbors on Leighton Terrace to discuss the replacement of their fence, at best there has only been occasionally flyers left at the last minute to residents of Leighton Terrace to advise them if heavy blasting was occurring that day or if particularly heavy road use was going to happen. And I live across the street from the development site, so I'm saying this as a resident as well as on behalf of the community association. And it seems we only find out what's happening on that site when it makes it into the press. Ms. Rahi, on the other hand, had said if their project at West Wellington and Island Park Drive had been approved, that they would commit to hold regular meetings with the surrounding neighbors to keep them up to date on the construction status and to work out any construction-related problems that might arise. So my question is, as councillor, what would you specifically do, if anything, to require that developers hold regular ongoing meetings with the surrounding neighbors during the construction phase of their projects so that the residents know what to expect developers know what the issues are, and problems can be resolved in a way that makes the construction of these projects as painless as possible.
Okay, why don't we start with Michelle Ryan on this one?
Thank you, Lauren. Well, that probably is one of the most relevant questions on the minds of many residents in the room today. So going back to citizens first principles that I have, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. You cannot work with a community over 4 years the construction's happening in Ashcroft without constant communication on changes that are affecting them directly. I was canvassing on Leighton Terrace only a few weeks ago when the trees disappeared from the backyards. They didn't get notice. Now, once they complained to the councillor and other Ashcroft, they did understand that it was because of the long-term damage on the trees that they had to be removed because of damage. But this is unacceptable behavior. And I said in our first meeting in a debate that you can't make a bylaw of civility, but certainly you can take leadership as a councillor, and you can take leadership as a developer and as the project manager on such work sites and inform respectfully the citizens. It's the least we can do.
Thank you, Michelle. And Ellen.
Well, Ashcroft has turned into a thorn in my side. I was casually walking along the street, going from the superstore going east. And lo and behold, the light there, the sidewalk was not accessible. It was bumpy terrain, and I would have had to take a flying jump with my wheelchair to get down onto the road. This is just one example of the type of problem. And my helper that I was with went to find someone to bring a ramp. I saw a nice looking guy in a dress shirt, so I called him over. And he, I knew he had some kind of association with Ashcroft just because he wasn't dressed like a plumber or a laborer. Anyway, I asked him about the sidewalk, why he hadn't made it accessible. And while I was talking to him, a woman in a walker came along and she couldn't get down. So some of the workers helped her down. I was still arguing with him. He said, oh, well, don't worry, it's going to be fixed in 2 weeks. I said, 2 weeks? What do you mean? I need to get off it now. And then Catherine happened along. I guess she was investigating the building that day. Oh, I can't tell the rest of my story.
You can't leave us hanging.
Okay, finish your story.
Anyway, Catherine came along and said, oh, I guess we should put the cross to other street further along. But that would have meant all the way back to the superstore. So, you know, it's just not practical. A lot of these construction guys, you know, you put the sign at the last minute, and then what do you do when you get there? Cross to the other side of the street. But in this case, it was a light, and I couldn't cross. It meant I had to go back 2 blocks, and then cross the street again, and then come back the same way 2 blocks. So this is a very real type of thing I encounter all the time, and seniors encounter. And, you know, I have a whole bunch of other issues with that place, but this is just a personal issue that I want to let you know. And this is the type of thing that council should be aware of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Was it worth it? Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Lauren, that's an excellent question, and I don't think the Ashcroft is the only example of where we've seen that lack of effective leadership on the part of the councillor has led to a situation where individual residents and resident groups are having to deal directly with city agencies, having to deal directly with developers in order to achieve some kind of positive change. I think Karen is in the room. She knows well the kind of pressure that the residents of Hintonburg had to put directly through the press onto the mayor in order to create the kinds of consultations we needed to deal with the detour of buses onto Scott Street during the LRT construction. I could go on for any number of examples. My promise to you, Lauren, is that I'm going to be relentless in advocating for the community. This sounds a lot like my traffic answer, but the pressure, the advocacy, the amplification at City Hall of residents' voices, rather than bringing City Hall solutions to residents as a done deal, or rather than bringing developer solutions to residents as a done deal. My promise is to be, again, your advocate, relentlessly, consistently, and effectively. Thanks for that question.
Thank you for that. And we've got Ms. Lieber, go ahead.
Yes, well, thank you very much. A very important question. Again, how do you train a developer to respect the community? I mean, this is a tough one because they're used to running the show. They just do it, and you have to adapt. You have to sort of find a way. So clearly, this falls to the city councillor to stand up and make sure that they understand that the community comes first, and they have to respond to the community needs. It's not an afterthought that you should all of a sudden, oh, maybe we should inform people that these things are going to go on. This has to be done ahead of time, and so it really will require the city councillor to step up and make your voices heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks very much. And it's such an interesting contrast in developers that you brought up, Lauren, Ms. Rahi, and Ashcroft, and how they have operated. I do want to mention right up front, however, there is something that the province has called a Provincial Planning Act, and that act requires developers to consult one time with the community, and that one time is the planning committee meeting. So anything else we get is gravy, and that is pretty bad. So there probably, in my mind, should be some definite changes to the Provincial Planning Act so that they are required to come out a lot earlier and a lot more frequently. So that is something that I've done consistently when there have been applications since I've been on council. Now, Ashcroft was done before I was on council. I've had to deal with a lot of the issues from Ashcroft, including that day when I went over to check out the trees and had to walk the whole site. But Ms. Rahi, for example, communicated with the neighborhood extensively. They reverse engineered that building. It took them a year. And when they got it to planning staff, they were turned down. So cited as a prime example of consultation and then turned down. So, there's a lot of issues here, but we definitely need to have meetings with the public up front when there's an application and meetings for the site plans. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. And that question was brought to us from the Hampton Iona Community Group, so we thank you for that, Lauren. And I see there's a lot of excitement there at the audience microphone. So this is the audience question portion of our show today. And I just want to go over some of the rules for this before we move forward, just to reiterate it. From the window. We should really take a question from the window. Okay, so Judith is saying if you want a question from the window, send it in. That's right. Okay, so so some of the house rules for this. Questions from the audience can be directed to one or two of the panelists here. And at our discretion, we can, if it's something of great interest, we'll ask everyone. And again, we're asking you to be brief with your questions, and because there's a lot of you who want Wow, is that a lineup?
Yeah.
A lot of you who want to ask questions. So the shorter your preamble, the more we can get to the answer. What else? What else do we want to remember? We also want to remember the candidates are requested to actively discourage their campaign members from asking questions. But if they do come up and ask a question, that they identify themselves as being part of the campaign. Audience members are allowed to ask a question, no follow-ups. But if you want to ask another question, just get in the back of that line and start again. So why don't we start with the first question? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Deb Chapman, and I'm a member of the Volunteer Gardeners of Clare Park, and I'm also asking this question on behalf of the Westboro Community Association. And this question will be directed to Catherine and Jeff. What is your commitment to ensuring that Forestry Services prepares and makes public a comprehensive report on its enforcement of the Ottawa Urban Tree Conservation Bylaw, because it hasn't filed a report since 2011, 3 years ago? No account.
Why don't we start with Jeff?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, I've been talking a lot about preservation of trees in this campaign. It's in the platform. One of the things that we absolutely need is transparent reporting on a regular basis of things like how many felling permits are going out per year. It's really hard for us to manage what we can't measure. One of my commitments is, whether I'm on Environment Committee or not, I'll work with somebody on Environment Committee to make that motion at Environment Committee and then see it through to passage at City Council to compel the Forestry Department to produce the report that you're seeking. Thanks.
Thanks. And it's my understanding that forestry are at the point now where they're able to plot all the trees that are on properties on a computer system. So we'll have a better idea where they all are.
Not the tree canopy.
And a better idea how to take care of all our trees, but and make sure that they're not cut down or we lose them. Unfortunately, that is happening today in great amounts. But I'm definitely willing as well. I do intend to get on Environment Committee and definitely willing to get that report. Absolutely no problem at all with that. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, air pollution kills in excess of 1,000 city residents every year. The city itself is the largest single polluter within the city. In this jar is a sample of toxic hazardous waste that the city recklessly pollutes in our air. For every dollar the city saves by its failure to use more effective diesel emission reduction technology, the province spends at least $160 in direct hospital costs alone to treat the victims. If elected, will you be fiscally responsible to the taxpayer and use
In is the quality of analysis under those implications sections. We don't do a very good job at the city, I find, of really doing in-depth analysis of what these are. I can't guarantee that we will be doing an apples to apples comparison with respect to the whole cost accounting of the policy decisions, but one of the things we can insist on is that those implication sections, environmental implication sections, be as thorough as possible. And my job as a councillor, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, is going to be to send things back to staff when I'm not happy with the analysis that I'm seeing. Thanks.
Okay, why don't we give an opportunity to Michelle to answer that too?
I just want to quickly answer that. And the same gentleman was up at the last debate, and what I wanted to portray to the audience is the complexity of politics and decision making. And what he's raising here is a public health issue. And so what he's challenging is our actual analysis of where we're going to put our money and our efforts in our safety and in climate change. So I could talk to you about safety on our roads and usability on our roads, but then a gentleman like this can come up and quickly remind us that we need to be thinking of other things that we don't see every day. So what we see every day is speed and traffic and congestion, but what we don't see is pollution. So he's talking about something else in and around us, those silent killers. And I'm no expert in that, but I think we need to be collaborating with the experts in that. And I would be very interested in doing so and incorporating that into the broader picture of decision-making at City Hall if elected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Michelle. And the next question, go ahead.
My name is Jacques Vachon. I'm a resident of Westboro. My question is for Ms. Hobbs. Although it's under environmental review, the LRT design is on the table. There is a design on the table, including 80 million in mitigation measures, which you support. These measures in no way meet NCC conditions. My question is, why will Ms. Hobbs not support putting the tracks and stations fully underground deep enough so that trees can grow to what is there today?
Thanks, Jacques.
Nope, sorry.
Thanks, Jacques.
Okay, next question, go ahead.
Hi there. Whoa, my name is Sarah McVie, and I'm going to change the topic a bit. I would like to ask a question about the arts. And this is my second debate, and I haven't heard any questions about the arts, just a point of interest. So, thank you. I'm a resident of this ward, and I was a teacher at the Ottawa School of Speech and Drama. I was also a student when it began 25 years ago. Its closure in February marked a great loss to culture and youth arts education in our city. In the final weeks of the school, there was a lack of transparency and poor leadership on the part of those in charge. Teachers, parents, and students lost money and were kept in the dark. Members of the public were misled and encouraged to pay for classes that would never be serviced. There was a lack of rigor in terms of financial controls and a complete erosion of public trust in an institution that had been a cornerstone of our community for 25 years.
Okay.
My question is, will you commit to investigating the circumstances that led to the demise of that school, in particular to the suggestions of mismanagement, lack of transparency, and poor leadership? And I would like to direct my question to Mr. Lieber, and I would also like Catherine Hobbs to comment.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
The Ottawa School of Speech and Drama was a private enterprise. These things happen in private enterprises.
Public funding.
Fair enough.
From the city.
Okay. There are any number of other organizations around the city that receive those, but they're still private enterprises.
So will you commit to an investigation
No.
of what happened?
No, I won't. There are any number of enterprises that fail across the city, some of which receive public funding.
This is 25-year history.
Sure, but it is a private enterprise. And as a private enterprise, I'm not going to investigate the closure of each one of those. I wonder if the decisions to provide that school with funding need to be examined. What were the decisions that went into that? But with respect to what happened with the school's closure, no, I will not commit to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, just quickly.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll be brief on this, and thanks, Sarah. The issue with the Ottawa School of Speech and Drama, which was an institution which I loved as well, and attended the graduation ceremonies and was working very hard from the city's perspective to keep getting funding when they badly needed funding. That was the city funding initially, and then they came to me asking for a significant amount of money which we couldn't provide through the city, and I managed to get them $50,000 from a private source in order to keep going. I never heard another word in 2 years that they were having any trouble. And when it came up that they were, unfortunately, because it was Mr. Lieber's wife running the school, when I asked for an investigation, but when I asked for an investigation, I was told by the city solicitor not to do it as it was a conflict of interest. And the city did go in and look at it. And whatever has happened on that, I have not been able to look at. I'm disappointed that a $50,000 donation didn't make good in that location, and that the donator was never recognized, and that the school couldn't make it with that significant amount of money. I worked very hard after that happened to make sure that all of the equipment and staging that we could get out of there was taken away, and that was donated to other arts institutions. That loss of the Ottawa School of Speech and Drama is something that was very, very difficult, and I would definitely, if I can now, I would order that because of after the election.
Thank you for that. And next question, please.
This is the question about taxation. The Ontario Association of Municipalities and the Canadian Association have all indicated over many years that the tax base is too small to be able to deliver the services that are required by modern cities, and that things are going to get worse. That's why taxes are going up, but services are being cut and privatized and outsourced and all that. I'd like to know from Larry Wasplan, who says better services are possible and lower taxes, how you can deliver that. And I'd also like an answer from Catherine Hobbs about the whole issue of taxation.
Okay, Larry?
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yes, better services and lower taxes. I mean, is that possible? It seems like today most people would say that cannot be done. Certainly, cities, municipalities have been arguing for a long time that there needs to be a better deal for cities, and that really relates to taking the burden off the property owner and the tenants in terms of, it's a very limited amount of taxation. So where do you go to get this needed money? Well, I would argue that we need to tax those that can pay the most. And in our society today, it's the corporations. And this needs to be done at the provincial level and at the federal level. But on city council, there needs to be somebody who's saying, where you can get this money. It can't be going back constantly onto the property owner and the tenants. So you need a strong voice in city council to argue for taxing the corporations in this province. So thank you.
Catherine, I'll just briefly answer that I think one of the biggest problems we have are lots of downloads from the province and the federal government and not too many uploads. And there's only one taxpayer. And the city of Ottawa gets, I think, about 7 cents out of every dollar that's collected from every taxpayer. So that's a real challenge to keep the social services, especially. You know, we're going to make sure that we do the core needs, but we don't always pay attention to the social needs, and that's something that's really critical in the urban wards. And we've been, freezing recreation fees over the last few years to allow affordability, and now we're at a state where we can't actually afford to provide a lot of recreation, and that is wrong as well. So we do need to look at other sources of bringing in funds, but the responsibilities on the municipalities is growing, and the money is not forthcoming from other levels of government, and that has to change, and something that I would like to very much work on. Thanks.
Okay, I just want to give Ellen a chance to answer that as well. Go ahead, Ellen.
Okay, well, I think the approach is, as Catherine indicated, is to work on the provincial government to fork over some of the money. The feds download part of the money to the province, and the province gives the municipalities, but the municipalities seem to absorb most of the costs for what goes on in the city. And money can only stretch so far. So the only way we can go is to hound the provincial government. I mean, they're responsible for housing that should have been downloaded to the cities, but it has been. So we need to tap into that money and make it part of what we can do for nonprofit and social housing.
Thank you very much for your question. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Clinton, and I have a question for both Michelle and Ellen. We're going back to the LRT issue. The current plan is, I understand it, that the NCC has asked, and so has Underground Solutions have asked, that from Dominion Station to Cleary, that this train track be buried. I'd like to know if you support that position.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Hi, I was invited to the executive committee meeting of Underground Solutions to be informed of the issue, and I looked at that issue and told them in an email and publicly that I would absolutely support burying that burn, and in order to meet the needs of the users of NCC and NCC's requirements for accessibility and visibility of NCC and preserving the ecosystem of that green space. But that brings me back to the original question, is the feeling of being succumbed to. That is the only decision in which we have, and it hasn't been passed by council. Carling Avenue as an option was $1.3 billion last time I looked. By the time the environmental assessment is complete for NCC and burying such a thing, we're going to be looking at a cost about the same thing. So we have to, at this time, we have to evaluate is if we're at an equal cost, then what is the right decision for the LRT? So I support it, if that's what you're asking, to bury it, but I also think it's time to just relook, is this the right decision for the Kitchissippi and for the rest of the city of Ottawa?
Okay, thank you. Ellen.
My argument, one of the things that I would worry about burying it, the LRT, is the fact that it's so close to the river. I would worry about flooding. We all saw what floods did in New York City. Now, granted, river isn't as big as, you know, the ocean that flooded New York City, but, you know, when you dig down right near the riverbed, I don't see how you can prevent flooding, but I think that needs to be investigated before we can make any decision there. But as I said before, I prefer Carling. But you know, I can say this, that, and the other about what I prefer, but it's actually what the citizens of Kitchissippi prefer. You know, I'm your liaison to the city, and that's why I stress that you keep in touch with me to let me know what you're thinking. And as I said, I can make all kinds of decisions, but if you don't like it, then I'm voted out. But I want to make sure that it's your interest that I am speaking to when I go to council.
Thank you, Ellen. I want to give this same question to the other, give an opportunity to the other the other candidates. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead?
I think I've probably made my position clear, which is that I support the full burial of the line, and in such a way that trees can regrow on top, there's sufficient soil, that we don't rob ourselves of the access to the green space. And I would encourage everyone to take a look at a fairly detailed position along those lines that is in my platform and on my website.
And Larry?
Well, I also support the burying of the line if it has to go that route, but as I said earlier, I would really like to look at the Carling option. I think that should not be ruled out. It makes a lot more sense to go that route. It really does. So that was my position.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Thanks, Kevin.
I feel like
Sorry.
I feel like a little bit of deja vu here because in 2010, this was exactly the discussion we were having. It was before the LRT, the decision was made on the Western LRT, and that, although Michelle isn't aware, it has been. This is the direction that we're going in after all of the assessments that were made for the other 13 routes, including Carling Avenue, which we set back and studied in a very serious way. Doing a full environmental assessment, and that is why this has come forward now, and this Parkway route is the one that full council has approved to go ahead with. And we haven't approved the functional design as yet, but that's because it's not done, but that is the route. I do support burying it to the utmost possible, and I just, in regards to because there will be stations that will be above ground, obviously Dominion Station is above ground, so as soon as we can get it underground, that's what will happen. We will be below the water table, and it will be within a cement box. And that is something that we are considering all of the factors to make this safe, and that is going to be part of the design. But the actual train will be in a cement box. It will be covered over by green, and we are expecting now that the multi-use path will actually be on top of that berm. So where we cycle and walk will be the walkway on top of the berm. That is the plan. But yes, I'm supporting that underground to the full extent possible and directed by the NCC. Thanks.
Okay, why don't we take our next question? Go ahead.
I'm Catherine Kimball from Holland Avenue. If I must choose, I would choose Catherine and Michelle to answer this question. It's about ranked choice voting, a more democratic voting system, which is now in place in many other municipalities in North America. Recent news is that Premier Catherine Wynne is encouraging moves in this direction through the province. So I'd like to ask you too, if you elected, would you make every efforts to implement ranked choice voting as in the group Ottawa 1, 2, 3? Would you implement this for the next election 4 years from now?
Okay, go ahead.
Ranked choice voting. Absolutely. Anything that can improve our democratic process here at the municipal level today, I would completely support. the implementation of such a change will take some study, but I do understand that Ottawa 123 and the movement on change.org for this petition is very popular, and that there is discussions already started at the provincial level to implement that for 2018. It's something I would very much support, yes.
I'm also interested in it, but there are some things that are worrisome. One of them is that, first of all, we have a very low voter turnout, not so much in Kitchissippi, we're one of the best wards, but overall for municipal elections, very low turnout. Another thing is the nomination process. And I think ranked ballots work better when there's a lot of equality between all of the nominated candidates, and doesn't work so well if you don't have that. So for example, if you have 3 people on the ballot and 2 are very strong, everybody will split. They'll vote, half will vote for one candidate, half will vote for the other, and the third person will be the second choice of all. So that's a concern with me and what I've heard, but it's something I would have to check out further. But definitely the nomination process, how you run for councillor is you just go into the city service center and fill out a form. That's a qualification required, just being able to sign your name to run a $3 billion corporation. So until we have a sort of a better nomination process, which I would also like to push for, where you need more signatures to run for councillor or for mayor, or whatever the process is, that I think is part and parcel of that, and I'm interested in exploring that entire arena and making sure that when we do that, it is completely fair and that we get the right results. So, yes, thanks.
Thank you. Jeff, do you want to answer that question too?
My support for ranked choice balloting is a public pledge that I've made to the Ottawa 123 group, and I do believe that it will help make a healthier democracy with respect to leveling the playing field between candidates who have various different levels of recognition or resources. I do believe that it can help make for better choice of people in this.
Okay, next question, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Carol Norris. I volunteer for Jeff's campaign, and I'm a resident of Kitchissippi. I live on a very small street in Westboro named Berkeley. We used to have 35 homes on our street. We have 9 single-family homes left. So for the last 8 years, we have been dealing with developers. We have dealt with good developers, but we have also been dealing with bad developers. The city requires a deposit from developers to reinstate any damage done to city property by a developer while he's doing his work. There is no such protection for the private residents. We have had car damage, property damage, hedges pulled out, fences torn down, trees taken down, children's structures removed. And in fact, a lien was just put on a developer last week in Roseville because he wouldn't pay $250 to reinstate a child's climbing fence. So my question to you is, what could you do, if elected, to protect the residents, since you already receive a down payment from these contractors? Could their property damage being done also be protected by this permit fee?
And who are you directing your question to?
I would like Catherine and Jeff to answer this question.
Why don't we get Jeff to answer that first?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure that we have the legal mechanism right now, but it will be important that we have it. I think many of us watched the videos that were available online recently with respect to the vibration damage that was being done to homes in Lower Town, I think it was, with no recourse for the residents to be able to get a stop work mechanism or otherwise be compensated for the damage that's being done to their homes. I don't think the city is doing enough to protect residents. And it's things like the basic nuisances of the day-to-day relationship between developers through things like damage. We clearly, if we don't have the mechanisms in place, or if we do, we're not utilizing them very well. My commitment is, if we don't have the mechanisms to seek through the province whatever it would take in order to be able to get these sorts of performance bonds, the bonds that we need in order to be able to hold developers to account for not ruining the quality of life of the people who live next to them. It's not residents who should be suffering the consequences of intensification. Intensification is important, but not at the expense of our quality of life. It's an interesting question. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, I actually like that idea. I know right now it is a civil matter between the two parties, but I think it is something that would be well worth looking into. Today, when it's a bigger developer and a bigger project, we obviously, if they do certain things to neighbors, we have a lot more clout, we have a lot more ability through the process to get that rectified, because they're going through site plan and there's various other things that take place when it's a bigger development. But for the small infill, it's a real challenge for those living next door or across the street sometimes, or on the whole street. And so I'd be very interested in that. One of the things that I've already directed staff to do is provide a booklet of information for neighbors, so that if you are being having an infill built right next door to you, that you'll have more information right from the get-go on what your rights are and what you can do in order to deal with that. You might call it, what to expect when your neighbor's expecting a new house right beside you. But it's a real problem. I've been to a lot of neighbors' houses that I go over there and I'm looking out their side window into an excavation, and they're worried about their foundations. I hear from people all the time about trees that have come out, and a lot of things that you mentioned, Carol, and it's very frustrating, and to have the feeling of your hands being tied is very difficult. So I do like the idea, and I would be willing to certainly investigate the idea of having a deposit looked at. Thanks.
Why don't we, Michelle, I know this is an interest of yours, go ahead.
Yes, this is an interest of mine, and people and how they are impacted negatively is a very strong interest of mine. I'm thinking that we need to develop the same kind of booklet that Catherine's passing out to residents, to developers. Now, really, if you want to level the playing field, we have to talk about the people who are coming into our neighborhoods, who do have the resources to fund and assist issues that are of damage on private property. So we really need to collaborate and build those relationships. And if we have to be punitive, we can be. But most of all, let's build that relationship and take some leadership and contact and work with the developers. I saw that video. It was extremely upsetting. But really, you would just bring the developer and the planner in and look at it together and be reasonable about what can really happen for property owners to not be such in distress.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question, go ahead.
I was at the last meeting, and our problem down on Scott Street is that the developer is the city. And in the past, we had a very large project where they brought the water from Lemieux Island, a block away from my house, and they obliged the contractor to have measurements, vibration meters, noise meters for that project, because they anticipated there would be some damage, vibrations. That's where some of the oldest houses from the original part of Ottawa. This contract, the contractor building the LRT is not obliged in their contract to have any vibration, air quality, or sound. And as Doug indicated, to add to that, they're bringing all the buses 10 feet from people's homes, where diesel is a carcinogen under 300 meters away. So I did ask all of you at the last meeting if you would insist that if the contractor is not going to put in these meters, so that we have a baseline of what happens before the project, so that we can actually go after insurance when we get the damage. And Catherine was the only one who said she would not do that. So my second part of my
listen, I think the first part's great.
Yeah.
Why don't we use the time to have them all answer instead of, okay. Why don't we start with Jeff? Go ahead.
As I noted publicly at the last debate, my commitment to you, Karen, my commitment to the neighbors who live in the vicinity of the construction detour is to work to achieve that baseline measurements that we need in order to be able to understand what the quality of life impact is to the residents who live right next door to what is really a detour of the whole transitway onto Scott Street. We need to understand that, we need to measure, and when we see the kinds of escalation of noise, of air pollution that I think we're going to see, we have the documented proof in order to be able to take some sort of action in order to be able to reverse that.
Ellen? Well, I agreed with you last time that we need guidelines, we need to establish a baseline so that we can establish what the difference is. And also, you know, they've done major renovations in other cities. And how do they deal with this issue?
They don't put 2,500 buses 10 feet from someone's bedroom.
No, that's true. But, you know, there's other ways of handling this situation. It might be that, you know, special equipment needs to be installed in your house to, you know, to purify the air or something like that. And that's something that the city should look into. How to make it more comfortable for the neighbors on the street that's being affected.
Okay, and Larry?
Well, yeah, it's the idea of baseline measurement is a bit of a no-brainer. It's kind of obvious that this is necessary, and if the city's already rejected that, you kind of wonder who's running the show. You know, I mean, so yes, absolutely, these measurements need to be done. But again, I think that the big issue here is not just measuring the damage and then saying, oh, by the way, it's now 300 times more than it should be. It's actually preventing this kind of thing from happening. So, I mean, can you expect to simply run all the buses down the same street all the time? I mean, I think you have to, obviously you need to have the baseline measurement, but that can't be the only answer. There has to be an answer to divide this up and make it work so that it's not just one street that's carrying the load.
Okay, Michelle.
Yes, so Karen asked this last week at the Civic Hospital debate, and I said it's logical to have a baseline measurement for both pollution and vibration. For me, an RFP, an amendment to the Rideau Transit Group contract is relatively straightforward, or the city can actually spend the money and the effort themselves. So
I don't trust the contractor. I'd like our city who works for us to do that measuring.
So I would commit to that if elected.
Okay, Catherine. Thanks very much. Actually, you can't have a baseline measurement until you have the detour done. And obviously that's because we're changing the road, it's being repaid, we're moving all the, any impediment in the street to the side of the street so buses won't be running over manholes and so on. We're making a lot of changes to the road in the detour plan in order to mitigate vibration and so on. So it can't be done, you can't have a baseline measurement until the detour is actually in effect. So that is something that in this particular instance, so you will know exactly what vibrations you have at any time in the city, and we've done this on Kirkwood, when there are, I'm sorry, Karen.
Sorry, that is not acceptable, Catherine. The baseline is what I live and my neighbors live today.
Yes, I understand that, but that is not the.
Sorry, that's a baseline test.
But that is not the situation that the buses will be on. It's not the same roadway. So that is an important distinction. But I just want to say that on Kirkwood Avenue, when we had terrible, terrible vibrations, we took the meters into people's homes. We measure in their downstairs, we measure in their upstairs, and we determine exactly what vibrations are happening. And we made changes to the road as a result of that. And I will commit to the same thing at this time as well. And in terms of air quality, right now, you mentioned under 300 meters, the emissions are there. The buses are all above ground at that location, affecting the houses at the eastern part of Scott near Bayview. At the surface level today, they come out of the trench at that point. So that air quality is an issue today as well.
Yeah,
Thanks.
but you're bringing them closer to a home.
They're out of time, and we've got another question right behind you.
Hi, this is also about the bus diversion on Scott Street, and yeah, they are bringing them significantly closer to our houses. This is a question about the traffic, and it's to whoever cares to answer it. I do a lot of walking in this area, and as you know, there are a lot of streets without sidewalks. Some only have yield signs at intersections, and as I'm sure you noticed tonight, not very well lit. When 2,500 buses per day began to go down Scott Street as part of the LRT construction, a lot of traffic is going to be pushed onto these side streets as people try to find a faster way through the neighborhood. Byron will become the new Scott Street, and connectors like Princeton, Clare, and Iona streets will become busier and busier. As commuters become discouraged with the delays in bus service, which will happen, it's not going to be as fast as they say that it's going to be. More and more people will abandon transit in favor of their cars, making the streets even more dangerous to walk down. The question is this, to whoever cares to answer: will you commit today to asking the NCC to put as many buses as possible onto the Parkway, to both improve transit service during LRT construction and to make it safe to continue to walk on our streets?
Thank you for your question. Why don't we start with Catherine? No, I will not commit to do that, and the reason is as simple. The buses onto the Parkway would delay the trip quite significantly. It would cost the taxpayers of Ottawa $4 million to buy additional buses to do so, and we would end up on the parking lot, which the Parkway is today. We would lose riders, and the impact on it, the amount of transferring involved in it, is something that the city has already decided not to do. And the issue with it, that was one of the things suggested. There was 5 suggestions that came from the community and were evaluated by OC Transpo, and their evaluation criteria included impact on riders as well as impact on costs. And that was not a viable solution. And the idea of having to be out on the Parkway at Bayview and having to change to the O train and have it not be possible means that you would have to be doing a lot of extra transferring. So no, and I don't know if anybody's noticed, but the detour has already started construction. What you're talking about would really not be an easy thing to have accomplished. The city would also have to pay to redo the Parkway because it cannot accommodate heavy bus traffic. As we have done in the western part, we would have to have also done that in the eastern part. The NCC has also indicated not a willingness. They were willing for dead-headed buses going against traffic. They're not willing for that. And then there's another issue once you get downtown as well. Thanks. Who is your second choice for asking that question? Whoever wants to answer it. Why don't we start with Jeff?
So I don't believe that the current detour plans are as good as it gets. Taking a really quick look at the number 61 route, comes out of Canada. There's 11 of them every morning. They get run about every 11 minutes apart. Why is every single one of those number 61 express buses going to serve each and every single station that is along the transitway? We know from the city's own numbers that 65% of people are going directly from Canada downtown. Many of them don't even make it as far. They get to Bayshore. Many of them are heading to points further east. Many of them are pointing, about 5% of the people who are coming are getting off at the stops that include Bayview, Tunney's Pasture, and LeBreton. Why not make the trip even faster for the people who are coming in from Canada, right? At the very beginning of this discussion, RTG was talking about a 2 or 3 minute delay. Today, they're talking about an 8-minute delay. I don't know that they actually know how long that delay is going to be, right? When I talk to OC Transpo about bringing some of those riders directly downtown, their answer is not that it's going to delay them. Their answer is that, well, that's going to be a much faster ride, and then everyone will want one. There are some creative ways to get more buses off Scott. The NCC is going to be a part of it. We have to sharpen our pencils. That's my promise to residents.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question, go ahead.
Hi, this question is for Jeff, Catherine, and Michelle, or anyone else who would like to answer it as well. And I guess I would have to give a little bit of background. Recently, a 50-year-old tree across the street was removed by a developer. And I was really emotionally upset by this, the loss of this beautiful tree. So I guess my question is for, if you're elected as the next city councillor for Kitchissippi, how will you ensure that forestry services and the planning department work together to put distinctive trees or mature trees on site plans and show their full canopy and ensure their protection according to our existing bylaws?
Let me start with Michelle.
Thank you for that question. And I'm really sorry to hear about that tree. We can do more. Some of these are symptomatic of a lack of coordination between 3 different departments, right? So urban planning, forestry, and those who come and actually take out the trees. So what I would suggest is better coordination, but mostly when the construction actually starts. So the coordination around the date of construction, so we can actually have these trees already pre-tagged for not being touched. So really, it's a simple fix. And I understand there's more technology out there to indicate where trees are during construction and infill. So there's no reason and there's no excuse anymore where these can already be pre-identified and untouched. And so there's no mistakes made by construction.
Catherine Hobbs.
Thanks very much. And yeah, it is awful. And when I was looking at this process, recently forestry are making the move to put them on site plans, and it's critically important. The first time that I ever went to the Committee of Adjustment was over a tree, and the Committee of Adjustment had no idea that a tree of that magnitude was on that property, or that we even had a distinctive tree bylaw. That was a big problem. Now they are aware of that, but they do need to see that on the site plans, and we've started to do that on bigger developments, but it has to be there for every single property. One of the things that is really important to me, and they do it in Toronto, they have rules through the permit process. As soon as you take out a permit or get your permit approved through the Committee of Adjustment or however it happens, you have to properly protect those trees. And you have to put the big fencing around it, and you have to have signs. And that is something that, if elected this time, that I'm committing to make sure is part of Ottawa's permit process, because it is critically important. Our tree canopy is critically important, and trees are a way to keep the health of the city. So very much interested in doing that. Yeah.
Really quickly, there is a software iteration that needs to be done in order to ensure that those trees are being shown on the site plan. One of the first things that I would ask the planning staff to do, though, is just start using Google Maps. Big trees show up on the satellite. Let's at least start with that.
Okay, next question. Go ahead.
Hi, Henry Bushman. I guess in relation to rapid transit and the city in terms of development, it seems to me that the system is pretty well broken, because there are rules and we're supposed to be fixing them, and it's been promised for a long, long time, and still they come back with twice the height that they're supposed to have, and then they get away with something more than that. And some of it's done well, and some of it's done atrociously, as it has been along Richmond, just past the Common, with those 2 8-story buildings making a concrete chamber out of that area, and ruining Richmond Road. I think is awful. Anyway, given that the developers have such a massive amount of leverage, there is a concern about the extent to which councillors receive contributions for their campaigns from developers.
What's your question?
And the question is, those people who are standing for councils, is there anybody who is receiving developer assistance with their campaigns?
Why don't we start with you, Catherine?
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I just want to mention, in regards to your first comments, in the last term of council, we were dealing with an official plan that was actually a faulty official plan. And what that meant was that if you did a community design plan and engaged hundreds of residents in the community, and their voices were in that plan was not considered first and foremost over the official plan if that subject went forward to the province, any of the provincial Ontario Municipal Board. So what happened in the last term of council is we changed that official plan. So it is no longer faulty. And that community design plans now take precedence over it. So anybody coming into council at this point in time with the current design plans, and we did 5 of them during this term of council, will not be having those issues. Those community design plans do take precedence. And so we know now with a greater degree of certainty where mid-rises will be, where high-rises will be, and all of those questions are not there. In terms of campaign donations, I am following all the legal requirements of the Elections act and what is able to be received, and I am accepting them from businesses, yes. And I'm not making distinctions on what businesses are good and which are bad. And the only thing that has ever influenced me in the last 4 years and will continue to influence me is the community and the voices of the community. Thank you.
Jeff?
Can I just add a comment?
No, that's, I'm
just
sure
say
it'll
that
come up again
The
along the
Ontario
line,
Municipal
so why don't
Board,
we-
the Ontario Municipal Board seems to okay things, and it just happens anyway. So that's all fine and dandy, but that needs to be fixed as well.
Okay, Jeff?
I've been fortunate in this campaign. We made a pledge not to accept developer donations. I sat down with a large builder here in town to have an exchange of views, and they actually slipped the check over, which I was pleased to slip right back at them. I think it's probably 135 individual donations today from people like you. My campaign is well funded because you are funding it well, because you want to affect a change in Kitchissippi. I'm grateful for your support. I'm grateful for the fact that we can work as a community to elect a councillor who is not accepting developer donations. It can be done. And for those of you who are looking at running races in other wards in the town, stand fast to your principles. Don't accept those developer donations. You can do it.
Ellen, go ahead.
I too am not taking donations from any particular groups, whether they're builders or unions. I don't even accept money from disability groups, because I want to represent you as individuals. And I can't do that if there's people pulling at my financial strings one way or another. So that's my promise to you, that you'll be able to audit my statements later, and you'll see that money just comes from either out of my own pocket or from contributors. Thank you.
Well, Michelle?
So I'm not accepting corporation or union donations. That includes developers. But I want to add and respond to something Catherine said. With CDPs closing up prior to this term and when we might be elected, it's not actually going to change anything. Really, like, there is an official plan. There are several CDPs from Westboro expanding to Preston Carling District, where I live. Developers are still submitting applications above and beyond what is set down. So whether we receive funds or not, and I'm not, it isn't stopping the pattern of behavior that's happening in this ward. So what I'm really afraid of when I'm listening and hearing my candidates up on this table here is we're not talking about the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem, and I explore this on my website as well, is the acceptance and the pattern of acceptance at urban planning level, that they don't deny an application that is above and beyond the height that is permitted here, now, today. Something could come in tomorrow, beyond, and we accept it. Then we take time for staff to review it. Then they make a recommendation to pass it at committee level. Planning committee approves it, and then council approves it again. This is a deeper, insidious issue that needs to be looked at, and it has nothing to do with donation fees.
Thank you, Michelle. And Larry, you get the last word on that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to say that I have not received a single penny from the developers.
Okay, next question.
Hi. This question came from outside the window. Now, I think the people who were outside have been let in from the crowd thinned down a little bit. It was a question about traffic calming on Fraser and Churchill. So if the person who submitted the question is here, would you like to ask them instead of me? Churchill.
Hi. Thank you very much. It's nice to have warm feet all of a sudden. I'm really encouraged to see so many people out tonight. Yeah, my question is pretty simple. Broadview Avenue has been overwhelmed with bus traffic and truck traffic,
And it's a result of offloading of traffic calming from Fraser. Now we have our beautiful new Churchill, which everyone likes, Tweedsmuir and so forth. All the north-south arteries have been calmed. There have been some efforts on Broadview Avenue, but I would ask everyone here in the room to understand that, notwithstanding the fact that it's a collector, it's a children's street. Little kids go to school every day. So what I'm asking is, how will you ensure that offloading does not continue along all of the north-south streets? It's happening on Golden. It's happening basically throughout the entire ward, but particularly in our area. I would say from Churchill over to, I guess, Sherborne or so. But just a general comment, how are you going to ensure that we work together as opposed to one street offloading onto another street? It really does concern us.
Who are the two candidates you'd like to?
I would like Catherine and Jeff to answer that. Please.
Okay,
thank you.
Go ahead, Catherine. Thanks, Gary, and it's a good question. I know that certainly during the construction on Churchill, every street around running north-south was experiencing the offloading from not being able to drive down Churchill, and hopefully when that opens at the end of this month fully, that we won't see that continue, because it's not great by any means. But what we did on Churchill, and I've had people write me and say for the first time in 25 years, I'm proud to live on that street. What we did there, I think, is perfectly conceivable to do on other streets, and I think Broadview would be an excellent place to do that as well as Dovercourt and Bayswater, and some of our north-south routes and our main east-west routes have become not part of our residential feeling anymore. They have become main thoroughfares. So I know we put in the flags on Broadview. We're looking at doing a number of different things. We've widened sidewalks to try and make it safer. But basically, I think we need to do a physical infrastructure change to those main roads to slow down traffic. And without that, and you saw it on Fraser, as soon as we narrow that intersection and people visually think that they can't get around that corner, they go a lot slower. So visually shrinking a road is, to my mind, the only thing that works, and the thing that I'll be pushing for throughout. And Broadview is one of the key streets for that. Okay, thank you for that, Jeff.
And I think to Catherine's point, it is a big issue. All of the north-south streets are experiencing high volume, high speed cut-through traffic, and we need to address that, absolutely. But what we can't do anymore is address it with small groups of residents on one street at a time. When we have these discussions about how we're going to mitigate some of the problems that are on the street, we absolutely need to make sure that everybody is at the table. A discussion about Fraser or a discussion about Golden or a discussion about Tweedsmuir can't happen without all the other streets next to it happening at the same time. One of the things that I have suggested is that I'm going to start up a new series of whatever you call them, ward councils or town halls, quarterly meetings of all the residents and all the stakeholders who want to attend to talk about the issues in the ward. And my commitment to you is to make sure that traffic is one of the first things that we talk about, and that we never do something on one street without talking to the whole neighborhood. I don't think we need to study them to death, but we do need to study them together.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Michelle.
Thank you for the chance, Amanda, to answer that, because this is pivotal to one of my priorities on my platform, and what I'm suggesting is a street lab series that takes place that involves all residents who have issues with their streets. I just want to point out, though, Broadview, when I was canvassing in July, they had a slow, middle-of-the-road sign by the high school and not by the elementary school. So how these decisions get made is beyond me, but it was pointed out by residents, and it was quite obvious. I took pictures of it at the time. So back to my street lab idea is to collaborate with the community. I'm not going to tell you what north-south and or east-west boundaries or commuter roads will be the best for a complete street. Complete streets are expensive. They're $21 million for Churchill Avenue. They're needed. The ideology behind it is very important.
but we can't willy-nilly just say, well, I think this street would be good and this street would be good. How do you decide that? I am not a traffic expert, but by certainly we would be coming together with traffic experts at a meeting that I would hold solely for streets. Not all issues, it's going to be focused on streets. And we're going to look at it from the larger ward issue, east to west. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question, and I can't believe you're all still here. There's lots of seats in front. If you've been standing for a long time and you want to take a seat, there's quite a few seats right here in the front area. We are going to take we have time to take a couple of more questions. If you're standing in line, you've already asked a question, you might want to think about giving the person behind you an opportunity to speak. And go ahead, we'll take your question.
Hi. My name is Jenny Gullen, and I'm asking a citywide question, which is also being asked by a group called Making Votes Count. Hopefully you've all heard of it. My question is about public transit in general. Ottawa has among the highest transit fares in the country, which makes it very difficult for a large segment of the population to make proper use of transit. People on social assistance, people earning low incomes, like that. It makes it hard for them to get around as they need to. And there are pockets of money potentially available to help subsidize transit fares. One is the continued uploading of money from the province, which compounds each year. The other is there's quite a significant surplus in the parking reserve. There's currently a community pass, which is available only to people on Ontario Disability Support Program. So will you commit, if you're elected, to extending the community pass to all individuals and families on living under the low income cutoff?
And who are you directing that to?
Well, it's citywide, so I think
well, two. Who are your top two?
Catherine and Jeff. I don't like everybody.
Catherine, go ahead.
Thanks, Jenny. It is a big issue, and it's the same thing with paratransport as well. Often that people are on fixed incomes and you pay more for paratransport, especially in some parts of the city. I can't commit to doing exactly what you're asking, but I can commit to looking at it and looking at how we might better serve those that are on an income that can't afford to take the bus, especially when it's needed. And you know, I know we've done things with seniors, with the senior population, so it's certainly possible to extend that. But I couldn't commit to doing exactly what you're asking today without examining what the cost would be and what the impact would be on other users of the transit system. And if parking funds, money that's in the Cashmere Park Plan could be used for that or not, I'd be willing to check that out. I think that's a really interesting idea and a good one. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
That's an excellent question. Transit is obviously really important to human dignity in this city for a lot of people. In order to be able to get to work and participate in the economic life of the city, they need access to transit. You know, I talked to Karen Secord, who's the head of the Parkdale Food Center, and she has money on hand for people to be able to take the bus who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it because the cash fares are so expensive. I think we need to rethink of all the fares that we have. Stepping away for just a second to talk about you know, others who are not in those streets. It costs like $15 or something for a family of 3 or 4 to go down to the Rideau Center for the afternoon. It's far cheaper in the short term, not thinking through all the costs, to hop in the car, head to the Rideau Center, park for $7.50. Our transit fares are currently serving as a disincentive to actually using transit. I absolutely agree that those who require the help to use transit, who are in a lower income situation, need it. I would have one question, which is always the question that comes up around these sorts of issues, which is how you actually determine whether somebody falls below the LICA or the low income cutoff. We don't do means testing very well in Canada, but that's not an insurmountable problem. We can fix that.
Ellen, I think this is a question that you close to your heart. Go ahead.
Well, I'm an avid transit user. I take the bus all the time. I don't take taxis and I don't take paratransport. And I've spoken with Catherine a while ago. We had a get together for about an hour. And I suggested ways that we could cut down on the cost of paratransport because it's a very expensive solution in the city. Now, there's people that definitely need to use it, but there's a lot of people on paratransport that just prefer it because they don't have to stand at a bus stop or be out in the cold like the rest of us. And one idea I had was that if people are eligible for paratransport, but could take a regular bus, maybe they should be allowed on the regular bus for free. That's just one option, because taking para is expensive. Last time it was about $26 per person each way. And if you've ever taken para, it's a real pain in the neck. You have to phone a day or two in advance before 7 a.m. It's very hard to change your appointments or do anything spontaneously. That's why I haven't really used it since the year 2000, when there started to be accessible buses in Ottawa. So there are ways to cut down on one transportation system and perhaps swing that money over to another to make it more affordable for other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Well, then,
Yeah, I'd like to just comment on that because I think we need a more in-depth understanding of the importance of transportation for the residents of Kitchissippi and the city as a whole. Because this car ideology that we have to make everything work for the cars, and then we'll slip the buses in here or there. I mean, the cost of transportation, taking the public transit, has to go down. I mean, in my platform, I really specify people on social assistance, unemployed, seniors and students. But overall, there needs to be in Ottawa a reduction of transit fees. More people need to be encouraged to take the bus, and the ability to pay is a big disincentive because people can't afford it. So the costs need to come down.
Michelle?
Yeah, and just briefly after Larry, thank you, Larry, for that. It's the least we can do to eliminate the barriers for those who are trying to make a life. And that's the low income, and then that's the student population as well. So what I understand with the students, for 8 months of the year, they have a pass that's at a discount. But for the rest of the year, the 4 months through summer, they have to pay full fare again. But they're in between classes. There's not a realistic decision-making model at the OC Transport level yet, and I would like to see that change.
okay, next question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Deborah Huron. I have lived in Kitchissippi Ward for the last 19 years. And my question is also a citywide question. I have in my hand some pages from a City of Ottawa report that was issued in June of this year. It's called the Air Quality and Climate Change Management Plan. It took the City of Ottawa 18 months to come up with this plan after it was pressured by environmental groups to do so. One of the important things that the United Nations said a couple of weeks ago in New York is that cities can be at the vanguard in working to mitigate climate change. This report talks about a goal that the city has of improving carbon capture and storage by protecting forests and wetlands that capture carbon. And then the appendix to the report tells us where those forests and wetlands are. And they are the Marlborough Forest, the Toblerone Forest. These are places outside of the urban core.
What's your question?
My question has to do with the validity of this report. When I read this report, I give it a V for vacuous. And my question, primarily to Catherine Hobbs and to Jeff Lieber, is what is your opinion of the current climate change plan, and how do you plan to ensure that a new and better report
be prepared by early 2015 by the new city council?
Why don't we start with Kathy? Go ahead. Thanks, Deborah. Well, obviously, what has happened on the whole Environment Committee over the last 4 years has not been desirable, and including that report. I don't think it's acceptable, and I think we need to do a lot more as a city. And I think the key way of doing that is to be on Environment Committee, which is something I've committed to do, and drive that agenda. That's how you get things on the agenda. If the committee members don't put that on at the beginning of the 4 years, it's very hard to get on the agenda later on. So I've been very disappointed personally in what's happened on that committee, and very interested in opening up those discussions. Can commit to what might happen in 2015, but certainly this term of council, I think we need to do a lot better, and I'm interested and willing to do that.
Do you have a second councillor you'd like to ask that question to?
Yes, I did say that.
But I guess the microphone had been cut off at that point. Yes, Mr. Lieber, please.
If any of the councillors around the city council table were disappointed with the climate change plan and air quality management plan that came out, we didn't hear about it. One of the things that I intend to do is to make sure that I am transparent about how I feel about the reports and the policy initiatives that are coming out. I don't think the plan is good enough. Had I been councillor, I would have said so. I would have set the expectation that when we come back from this election, that we have to do much, much better. And I believe that we do. One of the things that we have to do is restore what they call a corporate target for the city. So there are lots of greenhouse gases created in this city. 2 to 3% of those are created by the city itself, the corporate emissions. In the previous term, in the previous 5-year plan, we had a target for reducing those. We missed the target. So rather than double down and try to do better and reinstate the target, we simply eliminated the target. So one of the things that I will intend to do, if I'm on Environment Committee, fantastic. If I'm not working with partners, is to ensure that the city reinstates that. I've got 19 seconds left. The overall reduction plan is not very ambitious. I would look to other jurisdictions for more ambitious plans for greenhouse gas reductions, and I would make every effort to ensure that those get introduced into the new plan.
Thank you for your question. Next, go ahead.
My name is Elfriede Jeller. I live on Patricia Avenue, and I lined up here hoping to get an answer from you regarding campaign contributions by developers. It's been answered, so I just thought I'd take this opportunity and ask another one, and that would be a question addressed to all of you, all candidates. If you were to be elected councillor, would you push for a rule that requires every councillor to publish the campaign contributions days before the election? So that's my questions to all of you.
Who are your top two?
Say?
2 candidates. Which 2 would you like?
Oh, just 2. Catherine and Jeff.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's an interesting question, because it is, it's a difficult thing probably to do within the course of a campaign. You can probably list some of them, but it's kind of difficult to do that before you do your final accounting. They're certainly open and transparent as to what's happened in previous elections. And one of the things I should just mention, going back on this overall question, I was on the governance subcommittee in this last term of council, and we brought in some of the strictest measures on governance that have happened in any municipality in Canada. And we did that before any scandals, and that was hiring an integrity commissioner. That was making it fully disclosable how we were spending our office budget, a lobbying registry, a gift registry, and a code of conduct for councillors. I'm very happy and pleased to have been part of that change, and having caps on being able to accept gifts, which you don't get any of, but anyway, all sorts of other issues that are now fully transparent and open. I have no problem with any of that. Declaring any tickets given, I think it's great, and I think it's an important step to take, and I'm glad our council did that. And so I have no problem with revealing any donation that I've been given. It's part of the Election Act, so it's something that could be an interesting question going forward, and declaring as you go along. But anyway, thanks. Jeff.
It is an interesting idea. First of all, I would say on gifts that those are publicly available online, and I would certainly encourage you to take a look at each of the councillors' gift declarations. One of the, this was an idea that was also floated by Joanne Chianello. It happened too late in my campaign, but I know there was a suggestion made that we could actually publish our donors before the election date. I would love to, but I had too many donors to go back to say, could I get your permission? Otherwise, I would be making those available. And, you know, there are some people, anyways, absolutely. Absolutely. The mechanism within an online environment should be fairly easy to do. I would love to see the transparency. It's not illegal to take donations, but for some people, it's an election issue. They don't want to know that the candidate who they are supporting has been funded by developers. And there's no better way of knowing that than having sort of a real-time transparency mechanism like that. I would love to work with certainly the government subcommittee, working with our MPPs to try to push for such a change. Absolutely.
Just one little comment. It may be, just a few dollars that you receive, but I own a business, and I know when my clients come with a box of chocolate, that next time I feel like if they place a request, I feel like, I really should say yes, because, may have just been a box of chocolate, and it's...
Next time you'll just have to put your name up as a candidate then. Next question, please.
We spend millions to develop an official plan, which plans the development of the community. It looks at how that development will take place in an orderly way. And based on it, we spend billions to build the infrastructure to allow that plan to unfold. When we build the roads and sewers, we don't build them for a week or a month. We build them for decades. And so the plan is set up to allow that decade-long, multiple decade plan to be implemented. What happens then is the city routinely modifies that to give developers whatever they ask for. So we see development taking place at 2 or 3 times the intensity. And that means every time we do it, we change the value of a property from the pre-zoning value to the after-zoning value, which in the case of the convent, for example, went from 12.5 million to perhaps 50 or $100 million, which is a gift to developers by the planning process.
Okay, we're winding towards a question. I just know it.
We are.
I can feel it. The whole room can feel it. Everybody who wants a question. There we go. Go ahead.
Unfortunately,
who's the question for?
It is for Michelle and Jeff.
Go for it.
Taxpayers end up paying for the rebuilding the infrastructure, not the developer. Taxpayers end up paying to clean up the sites of the developers so that they can make even more money. What would you do to stop the excesses beyond the current official plan and the transfer of those millions to developers that result in citizens having to pay many more millions to rebuild the infrastructure that they've already built so as to accommodate those greedy wishes of the developers?
Thank you. And we're going to take one more question after that, before I go to the answers. And if you've already asked a question, you might want to give an opportunity to someone else in line who isn't going to get a chance. Why don't we start with
Catherine, go ahead, Catherine.
Sorry. Go ahead.
We know where Catherine stands on this.
So where I stand on that is we need to stop developers from pushing the limits and continually challenging the rules that have been set down, not only by the community and the time that we spend developing what the characteristics are that we want in our community. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. We need to stop that. But most of all, the applications, as I alluded to a little while ago, is how come the city continues to accept applications that are above and beyond the very rules and plans and parameters that they have set out. So it's more simple. For me, it's much more simple. What measures can we find within the city to just stop that pattern of acceptance of the application and the approval? Because we spend a lot of time as a city coming together. We consult. We don't consult very well. But we end up with something that we don't even have faith in anymore. So we can talk about infrastructure costs, etc. But I think we have a deeper problem in which I'm willing to look at closely if elected. Thank you, Michelle. Go ahead, John.
Thanks. Developers do have the right to apply for rezonings, and those will continue to happen. But when it comes to the city accepting or approving or not the rezonings that they're looking for, there are some things that we can do. We can have really well-written secondary plans that are bulletproof. I think one of the things that we saw at 335 Roosevelt Street, which residents had to pay tens of thousands of dollars to do through an Ontario Municipal Board challenge, which they shouldn't have had to do had the city defended its zoning on the site. But we saw that a well-written secondary plan was defended by the Ontario Municipal Board. My colleagues and I have been to the Ontario Municipal Board where there was no secondary plan, and the result was fairly predictable. You know, we settled an appeal in order to get some new daycare space and affordable housing, but the tower is going in at the height that the developer proposed. We need to have rock solid plans so that we go the Roosevelt route and not the Somerset Street route where buildings get approved and we can't defend our own zoning in front of the Ontario Municipal Board. Really rock solid secondary plans that are built through strong collaboration between the communities, with developers and with experts and architects at the table are absolutely critical. They're my commitment to you. Once those secondary plans are in place, I want to put every resource of the city available to defending those plans.
Okay, and since it's about the record, we'll give Catherine Haas a chance to.
Thanks very much. I just want to say that the official plan, as I mentioned earlier, has been the Bible when it gets to the Ontario Municipal Board. We changed that in the last term of council, so the community design plans and secondary plans do take precedence, so that your voices stay in the process. That is a critical thing to do. And as was mentioned, yes, legally the city cannot refuse an application. They can not recommend it be approved, but from the planning perspective, the Planning Act says that you have to take applications, and obviously the city doesn't build housing, somebody else builds housing, and the province dictates that you provide enough housing for 15 years out. So we have to make sure that we have lands identified to do that and plans identified to do that. 13,000 people move to the city every year. So the intensification policies that are underway have been underway for a number of years, over 10, and the intensification policies are dictating to have that intensification occur around transit stations. That's why we've done the 5 community design plans. And they are good community design plans that include benefits for the public, what we do on the ground, and they will take precedence over that official plan should anything go to the Ontario Municipal Board. But we just haven't had applications come in since that time that have been contrary to what is anticipated in that area, but they could, and we have a defense to fight them. Thanks.
Okay, this is our last question from the public tonight. Go ahead.
So my question is regarding urban chickens. So,
So in a time when everyone's worried about getting organic food and giving everything that isn't full of chemicals, in other cities it's worked. I'm pretty sure in Vancouver and the two other cities, they have urban chickens. I know a year or two ago it came up and it was a movement that was starting to happen, but never caught. I don't know why. But so my question is for Jeff and Catherine, if you guys would support urban chickens.
Jeff?
Thanks. I've had the question once at the door, and then in 2010, was that, who was that? And I'll tell you what I was hoping that was twice, because it was a real issue in 2010. Yes, I support urban chickens.
Yeah, as long as they pay taxes. But, I just want to say something just briefly about that, because strangely enough, it was the first question I got when I was running in 2010, and somebody ended up giving me a book on urban chickens, which I read, and it was fascinating. But one of the biggest issues we have in the city, and the group Cluck, and I think they changed to some other name subsequent to that, they were asked to bring back a plan to the city so we could consider it, and it never came forward, so that's unfortunate. But I have met with them a number of times, and I'd certainly be willing to go forward with something, and we do have urban chickens. They exist even in Kitchissippi Ward, so I know that, and that's great. I'm not going to report anybody, but and one little girl told me in Westboro, and I shouldn't have said where it was, and her father said something, and the little girl was so upset, don't say anything about the chicken, so it was quite cute. But one of our biggest problems in Ottawa in general is that our Humane Society can't deal with it. So if people can't take care of their chicken, or they're abusing their chicken, and they have to be, sounds really, a great way to end the night, but they need special housing in the winter, and there's a lot of issues to do with them. And but I don't think they're dangerous. I don't think they spread disease. But there are those perceptions in the public. But the biggest thing is that we don't have a place to take them if there is an issue, and that's important. Thanks.
That was a fitting way to end. That's the end of the audience questions, and we have a final closing remarks by each of the candidates. We're going to go in the reverse order that we started with. That's right. Catherine Hobbs begins, and you each have 1 minute for your closing statements. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Amanda. It won't take long because it's been a long evening, but I just want to say again, I'm running on a record I'm very proud of. I'm running on a significant amount of accomplishments that you can see on my website at votecatherinehobbs.ca. And I'm very proud of the plan I have for the next 4 years as well. It's been a great 4 years talking with you, dealing with so many of you in the neighborhood. And I'm ready to keep going from the day one after the election and keep the plans that we have in place going and put plans into place that I've been talking to you about for the last 4 years. A key one in this neighborhood is the 40-kilometer zone. First time we've ever been able to do it. The province is looking to have the zones. We're looking to have a test case in the city, and I think this is an ideal neighborhood for it. So it's one of the big things on my plan, but there's much more, and I really encourage you to look at the website, and the time is clicking down here. So I just want to thank you, and thank you, Amanda, and to Judith and Lauren and the other community associations. Thank you very much, and to all of you for being here.
Thank you, Catherine. Michelle.
Thank you. So I believe that cities are for people. I think we spend a lot of time talking about LRT and bridges and infrastructure, but we fail to talk about why we're putting them in place. And at the door, I've been privileged to listen to many residents telling me about different situations that matter to them. Mothers who are home with disabled children who don't have programming at recreation centers. Families that are at home desperately looking for childcare in the ward because of our growth, that we're not meeting the needs. Our supply does not meet the needs. So we have an aging population. We have lots of families coming into the ward. And I'm wondering how adequate we have been at paying attention to those needs. So my commitment to you, using the skills that I have in my current career of collaboration and planning and building common visions, building consensus, is for us to come together as a community and do a far better job together, setting priorities, determining, I'm at the end, and determining the cost of those priorities together. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And Ellen Longhee, go ahead.
We have not talked about seniors issues, something that's near and dear to my heart. And I'm not going to start now, but it's something the city needs to deal with as baby boomers age. I want to say why I think you should vote for me. People listen to me, and I get my point across. I'm not wordy, and I do get to the point. I champion the issues of the people who can't and won't speak for themselves. I will represent the issues and solutions of my ward. I am a hard worker and I find ways to get solutions. That's how I got here today, and that's what I have achieved in life. I'm well educated. I actually have 3 university degrees, 1 in psychology and 2 in social work, 1 being a master's degree from McGill. So vote for me. I will represent you, and you'll also get, as a bonus, more diversity at City Council.
Thank you.
I didn't introduce my running mate here. Her name is Tilly.
So I had a different closing remarks planned, but I've heard some things this evening that I think indicate that we have to have change. To keep it on a positive note, I want to make you 3 promises should I be elected. I will not attack you personally because I disagree with you. I will insist that my staff are civil and professional and responsive. I will not play politics with your legitimate interests. 3 simple promises for a better relationship starting October 27th between City Hall and us.
And last one goes to Larry Wasplan, who, this is your first and last debate?
Yeah, well, first anyway.
Anyway, I'm going to thank the organizers and Amanda, thank you. And most of all, I'm going to thank the citizens and residents of the ward, because I think you're an example of what the city needs. The engagement of the people in fighting for what's important for you. So I'm going to thank you for coming. I'm going to thank you for listening to all the candidates. And I'm going to say that Kitchissippi Ward offers a great example for the entire city. So thank you.
Well, and thank you for coming out. And honestly, I cannot believe that everyone is still here and still seated in. So just give yourself a hand. Really good job. And thank you, candidates.
Thank you, Amanda.
Just one second before everyone goes off. We went about 20 minutes over tonight so that we could get as many questions as possible. I don't know if Roger's going to be able to play the whole thing because we are over. I really hope we get the urban chicken question in though. Just want to thank Amanda. She did this tonight with good grace and excellent humor. It's not easy to do, and if you think this debate went reasonably well, it's because a lot of her input made it run smoothly tonight. And lastly, there are still cookies left. Take a cookie. Your sugar levels must be low. You've been here for 3 hours. And don't forget October 27th to vote. And there are advance polls on the 9th and 18th. Thanks everybody for coming.